It's 1 week until polling day in the 2024 general election, and we're here in Charlestown to capture a snapshot of the issues that matter to you most.
We'll be exploring education, economy, environment, housing, healthcare, and social and community concerns, and contextualising these against the main parties' manifestos to give you a greater perspective ahead of casting your vote.
In this Chaos Radio special broadcast, General Election 2024, Your Voice Matters, we've been speaking to local people in our community.
The first topic we're going to tackle is education, with Catherine Wescombe.
The first topic we're going to discuss is education. Everything from young people's mental health in a post-COVID society to how schools can further support families during the cost of living crisis. I'm happy to say that I'm joined now by Catherine Wescombe, a parent of lived experience, to share what she has been dealing with here in St Austell. Hello Catherine, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
My first question I really want to touch upon is what has been the impact post-COVID on the mental health of young people and their families, and what do you think schools should do to support this?
I think the main impact has been the level of anxiety that has been raised for children and adults alike, really, especially for the children that have got SEN need. There was a lot of funding that needed to be put into, especially the county before COVID, more so now. But I think for children that had an undiagnosed SEN need or wasn't really at the level of having an SEN need, that became more apparent now. Children have gone back and had to deal with this returning to school and the anxiety that has come around through COVID. But it's also affected children that don't have an SEN need, and I, from what I can gather from the parent forums that I'm in through Cornwall, is that children who never struggled with anxiety or go into school for some, that they have this feeling that it's not somewhere that they feel they want to be or need to be. I do feel that there's a lot of things that schools can do, especially to become more aware of what is known as ESBA, which is emotional school-based avoidance. With this, it's something that there could be multiple factors why children don't want to be in school, but I do feel that schools need to really start looking at their policies and not making them as strict as they are. They need to be looking at what makes a child comfortable, what makes them feel safe to come into school, and how can they avoid getting to this point, because everybody knows that prevention is better than cure. So I just think that schools really need to take a step back and just look at what they're doing to try and prevent this from happening.
And so do you think in Cornwall, do you think parents are turning to education alternatives like homeschooling?
I think there's a lot of hype around it, and I think that with the right backing and the right funding and the right support, parents would have the choice. I think a lot of parents though feel like they don't have that choice. I think it's something that they're seeing how much their children are struggling. They're seeing that these particular schools, mainstream schools, cannot meet the need, whether that's down to the way the schools are structured or how they're funded, the funding they've got to be able to allocate to meet that need. So I think parents are having to choose to home educate, but also with COVID and having the option to home educate children, I think parents are also looking at this as an opportunity to know that education can be delivered in any form, in any means. They don't have to be in an educational establishment. But on the other hand, being in an educational establishment provides a lot more than not. So I think it is becoming apparent that a lot of people want to home educate, but it's a difference between wanting to and having to that I'm finding is the issue here. So
yeah, and a number of the main parties, they say they want to invest more in SEN provisions. What would you like to see happen with that investment?
I think this is quite a big conversation that a lot of people in Cornwall could really put their 2 cents in for, to be honest. For me personally, I think that if the government could fund a lot of SEN provision into school to meet children's needs, then there wouldn't be the need for the external SEN provisions and establishments to be built and created. On the other hand, it makes sense to then get these children into a provision where they feel safe, where they feel comfortable, because a lot of the restrictions that are on in schools at the minute is about making children feel comfortable and wanting to be in that provision. But the children that can't go to school, be it in a mainstream or SEN provision, there is not enough funding for the local authority to be able to provide that provision to the children of Cornwall, which in turn then means that children aren't in school and they're going without provision for long periods of time. Waiting lists are extortionate for all the provision that are available. So if the local authority, if the government were to give local authority more provision, more funding to provide more of these outsourced provisions, it would reduce waiting lists, which means children would have access to education out of school more than anything else. But I do know that Cornwall really does need more SEN provisional establishments to cater for the influx of children that aren't currently in school and can't currently get into mainstream school.
And I'm wondering, as a parent, what are the current issues are you seeing that young people are facing in education, and what do you think should be prioritised by the future government?
I think for my personal experience, I think it is the restrictions. Children go to school, they need to have a comfortable and kind of relaxing environment. The more comfortable we are and relaxed as humans in nature, the better we learn, the more we want to know, the more we want to do things, engage, socialise. If you don't feel comfortable in a situation, you're not going to want to learn, you're not going to want to be able to express yourself. And that leads me on to the next thing. I feel that the freedom of children being able to express themselves, that's a huge thing. The government have cut so many of the arts at the minute, and music, art, drama, there's cuts all around. That needs to be strongly funded, because that's where children get that little window of opportunity to fully express themselves. So I do feel that that's something that is needed a lot.
And of course, a lot of families have also been hit by the cost of living crisis. I'm wondering, how do you think schools could support this, whether this be free school meals or maybe increased access to childcare?
I think one thing is really with the affordable childcare, making it affordable and accessible to all, even those on a low income, because if you have to pay for childcare to go to work, a lot of people break even at that point, and there's no money left over for them to be spending to put back into the economy. So it doesn't make sense for there not to be an affordable childcare system, a manageable childcare system, and more. I think there needs to be, I wouldn't say longer days, but more flexible hours for people as well. I think the vouchers that the government offered during the holidays, for instance, for food vouchers and things like that, they were an absolute godsend to so many people in Cornwall and beyond. And I just think, really, for all of us, it's just a case of making sure the balance of funding is right, and making sure that the local authorities and the general public get to speak to the local authorities and the members of parliament and their leaders, and really listen to what we're saying and where we feel that money should go. And I think long term, if we can all work together and just make sure that we are just collaborating on where we need it to go, then I don't think there would be much for us to really say, and we can move forward all together. So,
And some of the main parties in this, they've suggested free school meals. Do you think that would make a big difference for families here in Cornwall?
I think especially any on a low income, I know that the free school meals are available anyway, but again, the more people can save in certain areas, the more they can spend in other areas, which is only going to boost the economy. So that's what we need to work on, really.
Catherine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you to Catherine Westcombe and to Meah there. Looking at the main parties' manifestos on mental health in schools, the Liberal Democrats pledged to put a dedicated, qualified mental health professional in every primary and secondary school. Similarly, Labour promised to provide access to specialist mental health professionals in every school. The Conservatives are focused on improving school attendance through increased mental health support, whilst the Green Party say they will provide a trained and paid counsellor in every primary and secondary school and every sixth form college. Reform UK wants to promote child-friendly, app-restricted smartphones, as they state that social media is associated with what they call the child mental health crisis. Alongside this, they plan to launch an inquiry into social media harms. In regards to special educational needs and disabilities, both the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats refer to ending the postcode lottery with special educational need provisions, with the Liberal Democrats promising to establish a new national body for special educational needs and disabilities to fund support for children with very high needs. While Conservatives pledged to deliver 60,000 more school places and a further 15 new free schools for children with special educational needs. Labour say they will take a community-wide approach, improving inclusivity and expertise in mainstream schools. And similarly, Green MPs promised to push for £5 billion to be invested in SEND provision within mainstream schools, which would include fully accessible buildings and specially trained teachers. Reflecting on the effects of the cost of living crisis on families, Labour have said they will introduce 3,000 new primary school-based nurseries and free breakfast clubs in every primary school. Green have also promised free school breakfast clubs for all primary school pupils, while the Conservatives say they will allocate almost £3 billion next year to support disadvantaged children, including the extension of free school meals for more groups of children. One of the most talked about topics during this election campaign has been economy, as the upcoming government will be navigating a post-COVID, post-Brexit landscape, which could potentially see big changes in tax, employment reforms and trade. We're joined by local business owner Craig Holman here. Now, a selection of the main parties raised the prospect of employment reforms, so increasing wages, scrapping zero-hour contracts, even introducing a 4-day working week. What would you like to see happen in business and economy?
I think the starting with a 4-day working week, it's very much something that I think it's too much. You know, I think it's too much of. I think 5 days is just right. I think 2 days off, have them back to back, have them spread out. But to be free, you know, what's it going to be next? 3 days. You know, 4 days is basically part time. You know, so you know the days of full time now becoming 4 days, and part time, that's going to be like 1 or 2 days. So, or very part time. So yeah, I think we're pushing it, taking it down. I'm happy with 5. I think everybody deserves 2 days off, including myself. You know, I'd like to take 2 days off, but you can't always do that in business. And different businesses, hospitality is very tough for 2 days, but we can manage it. But, you know, different businesses warrant different hours. You know, if someone's doing 4 days and maybe doing 10 hours a day, then you're talking a different. But if it's sort of 6-7 hours a day, you know, it's becoming. I just think 5 days is the answer to that.
How about increasing wages and scrapping zero-hour contracts? As a business owner, how might they be able to make that accessible and attractive to you? Obviously, that's an added cost, but how could they make that attractive to you?
Well, wages, I think people forget that the business people have to earn a living as well. Yes, we have to pay people, and you know, and people have obviously to earn a living and earn a wage. The minimum wage, I believe, is quite good at the moment. I'm very performance based at work. You know, I think people are what they're worth. We go into shops locally and go into pubs, and we all know that some team are better than others, but they're on the same wage. You know, so why can't we? I think the minimum wage could go lower if they're not performing. That's how I see it. If they are performing, then the minimum wage, they should be put up. You know, if someone warrants, if they're going to bring more money to your business, then why not increase their wage? If they're adding noughts onto your business, but if they're taking noughts away because of their attitude and customer service in hospitality, then I'm losing money. So I think minimum, you have to set a wage, which is fair enough, but I think we have to be so flexible with that wage. And I believe if you're not performing, then you shouldn't be on the minimum wage. You're either not in a job or you've got to go backwards to then go forwards again.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Are you still feeling the effects of Brexit and COVID in terms of workforce, imports, costs, and any other aspects of your business?
I'll keep away from Brexit because you'll have to edit everything that I talk about on that. So, but as far as the COVID has affected the hospitality business for definite. I think mainly in team, because staff now, whilst COVID was happening, took other jobs and realised actually I can work 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, have my weekends and nights off. And a lot of people fell into that and thought, actually, this is quite nice. I'd rather do that than work evenings. So I do believe that we're now in a situation where it's a knock-on effect from COVID, and staff, especially in our trade of hospitality, is getting much harder to find because people have gone into, and fair play, if that's what they want. We're only here once, and I think whatever you do in life, you've got to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy something, do something else. The days of having to do a job, I get up in the morning and want to go to work.
Would you like to see more investment in apprenticeships and, in this post-COVID world, career swaps for adults?
Yeah, I mean, apprenticeships are very good. I think training is so important. I talked earlier about customer service and people not, and that's to do with people like myself, because I've got to lead them, I've got to train them, I've got to show them how to do it. So we do need people who are going to come through, but they need to be taught by experienced people who have been in the business. So apprenticeships are very good for business, but don't use them. Don't bring them in at £6.50 an hour. Actually, that's something that goes back to my point, really. If you're paying an apprentice £6.50 an hour or whatever it is, and they're working as hard as someone who's on minimum wage, it goes back to what I'm saying about this wage structure.
Yeah. Taking into consideration the COVID pandemic and cost of living crisis, what changes have you seen in the level of customer habits and tourism levels? So
I believe it's coming back. I believe that it's getting back. As you know, I took the Western Inn on quite recently, and I've been really happy with, I haven't had a day where I felt it shouldn't have opened, which is, as any landlord will know, that's good now, because that does happen. You think, what's the point? But luckily, after a month, I've been really pleased. So yeah, it's one of those that I believe that will come back. COVID now was a while ago. We can't keep blaming COVID. We can't keep using that as an excuse. Yes, it did affect a lot of people's lives, don't get me wrong, and mentally as well. I went through it. It was a tough time, COVID. But yeah, it's bounce back time now, I think. I think one of the problems I've got in the beer trade, and if you had to say one, people talk about smoking and people wanting a reason to come out now, but you can go to a supermarket, you can get 24 bottles for £10. Well, that's going to cost them about 75, 80 quid. Well, you do the maths on that. I know curiosity kills the cat and people will come out, but people are getting more and more can drink at home. We can drink at home to a certain time and then come out. That's had more of an effect on the business for me than what COVID has. Is the supermarket prices are coming down and down, and the gap's getting bigger and bigger. And beer, kegs, if you look at prices of kegs now, they're expensive to get in.
Last question now, Craig. As a local business owner, taking into consideration corporation tax, business rates, VAT, national insurance costs, everything else, what are you facing right now, and what changes would you like to see?
Taxes, everything now. It's so expensive to run a business. I think everyone looks at a businessman and think, whoa, lucky, I want to be one of them. Well, it's not like that. There's everything you've got to pay for. It's not just the beer, obviously. The electric, as we know, is at stupid prices. I mean, what happened there? That was just out of the blue. Every plug now you want in the, I know people are now switching the cellars off. I don't do that, because I think, even especially this time of the year, you've got to keep, but people are trying to save electricity and it's affecting their businesses, so electric is just where that went and how quick that happened.
So you'd like to see more support for local business, for business in terms of energy spend and energy cost?
Well, it goes back to the original questions, doesn't it? We want to take team on, we want to afford to take staff on, we want to give them jobs. There's plenty of work out there, but it's hard to pay a member of staff sometimes when you've got an electric bill. You put all those bills, and unfortunately you've got to pay the bills before you employ the staff. So, it's a vicious roundabout It's a lot of money now, you know, our freeze, everything costs, you know, and every business is looking for a penny off you, you know, and there'll be a legal reason why you've got to have it. And it's just gone, health and safety, got to have health and safety, of course you have, but come on, some of the things we're having to face at the moment on that, you know, and what we've got to pay for, it's a waste of money.
Right, that's all the questions, Craig. Thanks very much for joining us.
Brilliant, Tom. Always a pleasure to talk to you about football, entertainment, and now politics.
Thank you so much to Tom there, speaking to Craig Holman. Considering the main party's stances on employment reforms, the Green Party is seeking to introduce a £15 an hour minimum wage for all. Now, this is despite your age, and they are also supporting reduced working hours and moving towards a 4-day working week. Whilst the Conservatives agree to maintain the national living wage, they say they will ban the 4-day working week in local authorities. The Liberal Democrats are focused on boosting the take-up of apprenticeships by guaranteeing they will be paid at least the national minimum wage and setting a 20% higher minimum wage for people on 0-hour contracts. Labour have said they want to ensure the minimum wage is a genuine living wage, alongside removing age bands for all adults so they are entitled to the same minimum wage, and banning 0-hour contracts. Aside from this, Reform UK's stance states they will freeze all non-essential immigration to boost wages. When looking at tax initiatives being pledged by the main parties, Reform UK have said they will lift the income tax starting threshold and lift the minimum profit threshold for corporation tax to £100,000, whilst Liberal Democrats promise to abolish business rates and replace them with a commercial Landover levy. Labour says they will publish a roadmap for business taxation. Labour has also committed to not increasing taxes on working people. Now, this includes national insurance, the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax and VAT. The Conservatives say they will cut tax for workers by another 2p. That will be off employee national insurance, which will have halved from 12% at the start of 2024 to 6% by April 2027. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats say they will cut income tax by raising the tax-free personal allowance. Green is focused on taxing multi-millionaires and billionaires to fund public services, and they commit to no increases in the basic rate of income tax during the cost of living crisis.
Here in mid-Cornwall, situated in major fishing and farming communities, and with sustainable businesses like the Eden Project on our doorstep, the environment is a major talking point. Providing a further insight into this, we now welcome Anthony Hereward, a local GP and climate scientist. Anthony, the main parties have different or even no targets when it comes to achieving net zero. What do you think is achievable, and what would you want to see from a future government on this?
Thank you. It's a good question. What I'd like to see most of all is a vision. And I think the main parties in this election just lack vision. Where is there the person giving a speech about how the future could be, rather than talking about tax or something? Where's eco-zealots are not some sort of weirdos. They're people who want to make a better future for your children, my child, and want to see that future come about. That won't happen unless there's a good vision for people to aim for, unless people understand where they're going. Net zero, totally achievable, but you've got to decide how you're going to get there.
How would you get there?
First of all, take the International Energy Authority, which is a nerdy, well-meaning conservative group. 2 years ago, they said, no more fossil fuels. Which bit of that sentence is hard to grasp? No more new fossil fuels, is the thing. And yet, the current government and even the main opposition are saying they would carry on with the licensing of, or take the existing licenses for North Sea oil. Why aren't they talking about how production from the North Sea is down 2/3 on what it was 10 years ago. This is a dying resource. This is a dying industry. We need to have investment and speaking up the live industries. So net zero, there's always the three main areas, energy, agricultural, food and transport. And all three need to be pushed at the same time. Not to make a dull future, this will be an exciting future. And the big problem is people don't like change. That's where you need the visionaries to make them see that the change is going to be good.
So how do you believe we can reach net zero amidst talk of new oil and gas licenses and an interest in nuclear energy?
It's not a belief, it's a knowledge. We can make net zero. It's a question of will there be the impetus? First of all, take away fossil fuel subsidies, 7 billion globally. I mean, this is ridiculous. They made extraordinary profits at our expense. Take away those, invest that into the green future. So invest that into wind and solar, which are well-known technologies, and do not start going down the nuclear path.
That leads directly sort of into my next question. What green and renewable energy sources would you like to see more of in Cornwall?
Cornwall is wonderfully situated, being right out in the southwest here. We have great solar, we have good wind. The tidal and wave stuff is still in development. So first of all, take what is doable now, develop that now, because we've got to act quickly. And at the same time, run a parallel research and testing for the things which are a little harder. Cornwall is also the only place in the UK which can really do geothermal because of the geology. A lovely sort of behemoth of granite is upwelling in Cornwall. So we've got Eden, we've got the geothermal near Redruth. That could be developed, but that's going to take time. We need to work quickly now.
The main parties also have different targets for electric vehicle use. Is Cornwall prepared for this, and what support is required?
I'm a keen supporter of electric vehicles. Had one myself 7 or 8 years. They are so cool. I mean, I don't know whether you've driven one, but they're fastest acceleration I've had of any car. They don't make a noise, they don't make a smell. But that's not the whole answer. We do need a bigger infrastructure for electric vehicles, but we can't just exchange all fossil fuel vehicles for electric vehicles. So at the same time, there has to be a big development of the public transport system to make it cheap, to make it reliable, to make it friendly. So people will want to use it and will opt to use it rather than using their car. And imagine a different sort of future where when people come on holiday to Cornwall, or when you go on holiday to wherever you like to go, you go by train. You arrive there and you can hire an EV or you can hire e-bikes to do whatever you want to do on a day or weekly basis. Gosh, that would take a lot of traffic off the road. You wouldn't need to expand the A30, you know. At the same time, look at e-bikes and bike lanes. Make it more friendly. Make it the option people will want to do. In my day, we used to cycle to school. You don't see cyclists now because they're afraid. Make it so it's no longer a dangerous occupation to cycle around. Make it so it's more friendly to walk, to cycle, to use the public transport.
We're going to change tact a little bit now.
Go for it.
Is enough being done to hold water companies to account?
Gosh, don't get me started on water companies. I'm sure everybody is in for water companies. It's an absolute disgrace that on average, over 3 hours a day, raw sewage is going down the White River, St Austell River. Several years ago, a group presented South West Water with a way to sort it out using reed bed technology. Landowners were approached and sympathetic, and at that time South West Water were, because the government was going to fine them quite a considerable money and they could commute that into a project like that. Then the government decided, no, it'd be cruel to take away all that money from them. So suddenly South West Water are not interested any longer.
So what would you like to see in terms of things like sewage discharge, leaks, drought resilience?
Sewage discharge, we can sort it in St Austell if only there's the impetus behind it. As far as the water supply goes, of course you've got to fix the leaks. It's ridiculous. You wouldn't just leave a tap running at home. I know it's hard to do, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. All new builds should have grey water recycling in, should have rainwater capture. Not hard to put in if you put it in at the start. There should be a retrofit scheme, so people like me in an older house, I need to know how to do it. I need a grant to help me do it, but it's possible. So usage would go right down, leakage would stop the waste that's going on. And you want me to talk about desalination plant? Total nightmare. Ecological and financial nightmare. But if you want a more nuanced and balanced view, go to Cornwall Wildlife Trust. Read their paper on it.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you to Anthony Hereward, local GP and climate scientist.
When we look at what the main parties are saying in their manifestos about heading towards net zero, we can see that Reform UK have announced they will scrap all net zero initiatives and related subsidies, which they claim will save the public sector over £30 billion per year. The other main parties have different net zero targets, with Conservatives remaining committed to delivering net zero by 2050, whilst the Liberal Democrats pledge they can reach this by 2045 at the latest. Labour says they will make Britain a clean energy superpower, delivering zero carbon electricity by 2030, which they say will accelerate their net zero plans. Whilst Greens say they will push the government to transition to a zero carbon society as soon as possible, and more than a decade ahead of 2050. Now, many of the main parties also speak about electric vehicles. The Green Party have said they want to end sales of new petrol and diesel fueled vehicles by 2027 and to stop the use of these petrol and diesel vehicles on the road by 2035. Meanwhile, Labour promises to accelerate the rollout of charging points and restore the phase-out date of 2030 for new cars with internal combustion engines, matched by the Liberal Democrats similarly saying that every new car and small van sold from 2030 must be zero emission. The Conservatives have said they would achieve this by 2035, whilst Reform UK have pledged to scrap the ban entirely on petrol and diesel cars, and that they will issue no legal requirements for manufacturers to sell electric cars. Finally, when we look at water policies, Reform UK has made no announcements on water policies, yet the Green Party have said they would take the water companies back into public ownership and commit to making at least 30% of UK domestic waters into fully protected marine protected areas by 2030. The Conservatives have promised to further hold companies accountable, such as banning executive bonuses if a company has committed a serious criminal breach. Labour also want to do this, as well as bringing about criminal charges against persistent lawbreakers and placing failing water companies under special measures. The Liberal Democrats say they want to give the big water companies the duty to protect the environment and ban them from dumping raw sewage into rivers, lakes and coastal areas. Many of the manifestos have been focused on reforming issues in society and providing increased powers for local communities, as well as regenerating our towns and high streets. I'm happy to say that I'm joined by Emma Lankford, St Austell Centre Manager for Cornwall Neighbourhoods for Change, and alongside her we have co-design community member Sam Keast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Firstly, Emma, can I ask you about what the co-design community group is all about?
The co-design group was based on the Viva report, which was written back in 2019. It was called the Viva report, and it was to represent people feeling valued, people to feel fully included, people to have their voices heard, even though sometimes the stories they had were difficult to hear, and for them to celebrate achievement, even though it wasn't necessarily what the professionals were expecting. So the Viva report then has been developed over the years, and it's mainly about the community group becoming community leaders in addressing issues that they're facing in their own communities and how they can make positive change within the community.
Lovely. And Sam, you're a member of the co-design community group here in St Austell.
Yes, I am.
I'm wondering what changes have the group shared that they'd like to see in their local community? What concerns might they have at the moment?
I think it's the general concern is I've grown up in St Austell all my life, and it has changed society-wise. It's not so community togetherness anymore. And I think with the shops and everything, it's become difficult, but it is changeable. And I think doing it the right way, you know, it's like the doctors, all these services. You've got to understand that older pensioners don't want to use a computer, get confused at press number 1 for whatever, and it's difficult. And people don't like to speak up. So we're here really to speak up for them on issues that they have. They have concerns about, and it's just general real life issues.
And being part of that group, do you feel like not only are you being heard in that group, but you're being heard by maybe professionals or organisations that can make change?
I think you can make yourself heard in the right way, and when it comes down to it, people can come across like Emma. They have working relationships with people that they can talk to. We give Emma the information she needs and the ideas from the co-design. She can take it away and approach the right people, and hopefully get out there and drive it a bit easier.
Yeah, and personally for you, thinking about St Austell, have there been changes that have already been made that have been positive?
Yes, there has actually. Last 12 months I would say there's been a drive on obviously making it a bit safer to walk through the streets, and it is viewable. There's no people sleeping in the doorways anymore, so there has been positive change, but you've still got a little bit to go, I think.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
And Emma, some of the parties, they are focusing on tackling what they call antisocial behaviour. Is this what the future government you think they should be focusing on and dealing with when we think about community concerns?
That's one component. I think that's one component. When communities come together and they know about what's going on in their communities, they feel safe in the community. So the government spends, we need a whole kind of, the whole systems are out of sync really, so there needs to be money spent on these systems to bring them up to date, because they are so way out of date. The education system is out of date, the judicial system is out of date. The antisocial behaviour issue in St Austell has been addressed. Unfortunately, that gets let down at the very last minute when it comes down to the judicial system, and they're let back out on the streets again. But again, we can look within that, and we can look at issues around housing, homelessness, lack of provision in our communities, and the lack of hubs, which we most desperately need really, like youth hubs and more sort of groups and community groups for our older generations.
Yeah, and thinking about a government that might come in soon, and in terms of what they could invest in, you've touched upon maybe more youth provisions and also tackling some of those societal issues that all link with each other. Where would you like to see, maybe thinking about St Austell, some of that money spent?
The town regeneration of the town. It is known that St Austell is the only town in Cornwall that you actually don't drive through, and that takes away business from the high street. But also we need to be looking at joined up services within our social care and our health provision, mental health, hospitals, doctors, dentists, I could go on, but a more joined up service there and a more preventative service around that as well.
And you've just touched upon that there. Do you think a major kind of investment in public services would see a positive reaction in sort of the centre of towns and local communities?
I think so. When people are healthy, they're happy. They come out, they join up with each other, and they talk about things, what the co-design group do, talk about things that matter to them to make that positive change in the communities. And that's what we need. We need healthy people, healthy communities. We just all coming together to make that positive change.
And I'm interested, where you are at CM4C, what are kind of maybe the main barriers or issues that people are saying that they are facing in St Austell right now?
The priority one that we've hit on with in the group recently is health and well-being. That is a major issue for people across the board. It's indiscriminative, it doesn't matter who you are, it's actually hitting everybody. The other one that we're looking at is the cost of living crisis. That's causing issues, yes, again, across the board. And unfortunately, what that has is a huge impact on families and family support.
It has just a knock-on effect on every part of your life, really.
Domino effect, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Lovely. And just finally, there are a few suggestions from some of the main parties that they would like to reform the voting system. So maybe bringing in proportional representation or lowering the voter age. I'd like to ask both of you, what are your thoughts on this?
We're going to go down to the education system route, I'm afraid. Children aren't taught these things in school anymore. They're not taught about citizenship. They're not taught about preparation for adult life. If they're not taught about citizenship, how can they have a sense of belonging within their communities and a sense of ownership? Why would they want to participate? And if children can get married, pay tax, and do all these other things at 16 years old, why can't they vote? Because these votes that they have is going to really change their future. So it's really about what matters to them and having that vote to hopefully make those positive changes yet again for the future.
Yeah, and finally, Sam, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with that actually, because I think our younger generation is coming up through, and the older generation obviously are going to be in the future not here, and it is important that they feel like the changes they want to make now to go forward in life and see those changes happen. I think it's important.
Yeah, thank
Definitely.
you so much to the both of you for joining me today. That was Sam Keast, a member of the Co-Design Community Group, and Emma Langford, the St Austell Centre Manager for Cornwall Neighbourhoods for Change.
Let's have a look at what the manifestos say. 3 of the main parties have pledged to reduce the minimum voting age to 16. Labour wants to increase the engagement of young people in our democracy by giving 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote in all elections. The Liberal Democrats and Green Party each promised to end the need for voter IDs in a bid to strengthen democratic rights and participation. The Green Party also stands for a proportional voting system rather than the current method of first past the post. This, however, is something which the Conservatives remain committed to and say maintains a direct link with the voter. Reform UK will bring an end to postal voting, except, they say, for the elderly, disabled, or those who can't leave their homes, in an attempt to tackle electoral fraud. Moving on to public services now. Labour plan to tackle antisocial behaviour with the addition of 13,000 neighbourhood police and community PCSOs and restore patrols to town centres. They pledge to install specialist teams in every police force to deal with rape and sexual offences. The Green Party, meanwhile, plan a fund for local authorities so that, they say, domestic violence, rape crisis and other provision can meet local needs. The Conservatives will roll out what they call hotspot policing, where officers focus on known problem areas for certain crimes and behaviours, while Reform UK plan to shake up the training of new officers, prioritising crime prevention, discipline, public service and high standards of strength and fitness. The Liberal Democrats focus on what they describe as an urgent need to draw up a national recruitment, training and retention strategy to tackle the shortage of detectives. Finally, we're going to look at town regeneration. Support and ownership of our towns and high streets is a major talking point amongst the 5 main parties. The Conservatives pledge to ensure councils provide high quality, value for money services to local communities, a £20 million endowment fund for local people to change their town's future, and a 3-year extension of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Labour, meanwhile, promised that towns and cities will be able to take hold of the tools they need to pursue growth, create jobs and improve living standards. The Liberal Democrats say they will provide enhanced powers to help local authorities protect community assets like pubs, community farms and other vital infrastructure. Away from town centres, the Liberal Democrats also make a number of pledges to support rural areas, including powers to restore bus routes and add new ones where there is local needs, expanding rural fuel duty relief, and appointing a cross-departmental minister for rural communities. The Conservatives, meanwhile, plan to launch a Seaside Heritage Fund.
There is a huge focus on reforming the NHS, with discussions around budgets, attracting and retaining staff, and reducing wait times. I'm joined now by Sally Allen, a healthcare assistant at a local hospice. Thank you so much for chatting to me today, Sally. I'd like to first ask you, a lot of parties are raising the prospect of increased funding to the NHS, and I wonder, with your experience, what areas do you think they should focus on?
Well, I think there needs to be a lot more investment in health and social care, because that's been underinvested for a long time, and I think all of us have noticed how there have been a lot of people waiting in the hospital for a long time to be discharged and getting care packages. And so I've been aware of this, particularly where I work, and this has affected an awful lot of people. So certainly that would be very high on my agenda if I was able to talk to anybody about it. And I know the government had touched on it before, but they certainly haven't done anything about it. So yeah, that's one of them. The other area is GP services and waiting lists for surgery. So those are three key areas.
Absolutely. And I'm interested, a lot of the plans that they have in place, it has a lot of numbers of new doctors and new nurses that would have to put these policies in place. I'm wondering, how do you think they're going to be able to attract new members of staff and, importantly, retain them?
Well, I think there's an awful lot of infrastructure going into Cornwall, but it's affordability. I think there is still a problem in attracting doctors to Cornwall. They're not able to retain GPs to practices. I don't know why that is, because it's a wonderful place to live. So, I don't think it's to do with housing for doctors. So there must be something else going wrong there. I think they need to find, I don't know, that they need to do some research, but that is a key problem. Certainly for other sectors with nurses, I think it's affordability. Our housing is really expensive and we haven't got enough of it. So I think we need more affordable housing for our nurses, and of course it's wages as well. And that's been a big area of concern for some time, hasn't it? So the new government, if there is a new government, need to address that. Yeah.
And I know that obviously you have your lived experience as a healthcare assistant, but also I'm wondering what you see are the difficulties that people are facing in general in Cornwall when accessing healthcare, and maybe what needs to change.
Well, certainly, again, we've got GP surgeries really struggling. They changed the way they started to work since COVID, and they never went back to how they were before. And I think that has impacted services. I don't know why they never went back. I understand, again, it's to do with the GPs, the amount of GPs in surgeries. They started using paramedics and nurse practitioners and things to support them as well. But again, I think it's to do with staffing. I just think the whole system needs to be reviewed. I think it's waiting lists. I think it's health and social care. It's the whole package. I think, I don't know. I think you need somebody needs to just review everything, you know. I'm not perfect, I don't know what the answer is, but it's a big deal really, isn't it? Yeah.
And in your personal experience, have you seen sort of any concerns when trying to access healthcare, whether that be the hospitals or the GPs?
Yeah, well, I've had personal experience with looking after my own mother. We had to wait a very, very long time, over a year after being assessed, to get a package of care. And I think that was because she was at home and in a place of safety, being looked after by family. So I think they tend to look at people who are in hospital first as a priority. So I think, and actually that brings me to another thing. I think carers themselves are a low priority. So I would like to see carers getting more priority actually and more support. Because they get very little support. So yeah, that was one of the areas I think we've had quite a big impact on ourselves personally. But the other one is I've also a sister who's been waiting a long time on the waiting list for an operation. So 2 areas really, yeah.
And just finally, if you had a message to say a new or a future government or people that are making these decisions with sort of funding or where they prioritise healthcare, what would you like to say to them?
I'd like somebody to come to my door actually. I haven't seen anybody canvassing yet. I've only just started to see the odd leaflet drop through, but I'm still quite stuck about what to do. So I'm not getting a clear enough message from any of them. So I'd like to see somebody coming round and helping me make a decision actually. So yeah, get somebody round into Grandpound.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sally, thank you so much for joining us today.
That's all right.
That was Sally Allen. She is a healthcare assistant at a local hospice talking about healthcare.
Let's have a look at what the parties are saying. So many of the main parties are focused on the NHS. Labour says they'll deliver an extra 2 million NHS operations, scans and appointments every year. That's 40,000 more appointments every week, by incentivising staff to carry out additional appointments out of hours. And that a community pharmacist prescribing service will grant more pharmacists independent prescribing rights where clinically appropriate. The Liberal Democrats have pledged that they'll give everyone the right to see a GP within 7 days or within 24 hours if they urgently need to, with 8,000 more GPs to deliver on it. Green is focused on tackling staff retention and boosting the pay of NHS staff, pushing for an immediate and additional increase to the budgets for NHS staff costs, as well as supporting the junior doctors' call for pay restoration, whilst also promising guaranteed access to an NHS dentist for everybody and restoring local council budgets for public health. Reform UK, meanwhile, have said that all frontline NHS and social care staff will only need to pay 0 basic rate tax for 3 years, and they will offer tax incentives for new pharmacies and those who employ more staff to assist in relieving pressure on A&E. The Conservatives say they will cap migration to protect public services, including the NHS, also requiring migrants to pay the immigration health surcharge and undergo a health check in advance of travel. Aside from this, by the end of the next Parliament, they say there will be 92,000 more nurses and 28,000 more doctors within the NHS than in 2023.
And that was Chaos Radio's General Election 2024, Your Voice Matters.
Let's continue the conversation. Email news@chaos.radio or search Chaos Radio UK across socials.
Polling day will be on Thursday, the 4th of July 2024. And if you are visiting your local polling station, please do remember to take your photo ID.
Thank you very much for watching.